and welcome everyone to the Show Sleuth podcast, where we as detectives break down new episodes of popular TV shows and other media. I'm your host, Ben, and today we're kicking off part 1 of our new series covering the show Sunny. This is also our first podcast, and I want to take just a few minutes to explain to new listeners what you can come to expect from the show. The other day, I was watching the newest episode of The Boys and texting back and forth with my friend David about our thoughts and theories for where the series was going moving forward. And I realized how much fun I had having these discussions, although due to the hustle and bustle of modern day life, I found it hard to have them often. Growing up, I always loved television. Watching TV was how my family bonded and spent most of our free time. I also have a passion for cinematography, video editing, and creative writing. So combine that with the itch I've had to start a new podcast for the last couple of weeks, and the idea for Show Sleuth was born. While I am the sole host of the podcast, this is meant to be a discussion, so please do engage with us in the comments to let us know your own thoughts and theories of each episode that we cover. We'll be following along with a couple of shows week to week as they release new episodes and go through a full synopsis of what happens in each episode as we break them down and theorize on what's coming next. Now that we've got that covered, let's give you some more information about Sunny, the TV show we'll be covering in this series in the briefing. Sunny is a dark comedy that's streaming on Apple TV Plus that follows the life of an American woman living in Kyoto, Japan, when her husband and son disappear in a mysterious plane crash. As consolation, she's given Sunny, one of a new class of domestic robots made by her husband's electronic company. The executive producer and lead of the show is Rashida Jones, who I always remember for their roles in Parks and Recreation and The Office. She plays the role of Susie Sakamoto. Some accompanying cast members are Hidetoshi Nishima, who plays Masa Sakamoto, Susie's husband, and Joanna Sotomura, who's the voice actor for Sunny the Robot. Episode 1 is titled simply He's in Refrigerators and is directed by Lucy Cherniak. Filming for the series began in July of 2022 in Japan, and this show is based on a novel written by Connor O'Sullivan. On July 10th, the show debuted with a 2-episode premiere, and there will be 10 episodes in total, releasing on a weekly cadence. Now that we have some basic information about the show, we're going to be covering a full synopsis of episode 1. But before we continue, please be advised, this is your spoiler warning. All of these podcast episodes are going to be very spoiler heavy, and we're going to be detailing everything that happens in the show. So if you haven't watched the show yet and you wish to do so, please pause the podcast now and come back and see us later. Otherwise, you've been warned. Whoa, hold on a second. Sorry to take you away from the episode, but I wanted to take just a moment to tell you about today's sponsor, the Show Sleuth Patreon. That's right, baby. There's no promotion like shameless self-promotion. On a serious note, if you enjoyed today's episode and our podcast overall, the number one way to support us is by becoming a member on our Patreon. For just $5 a month, you gain access to an exclusive Discord community, exclusive video and live streamed content, voting polls to help us determine which shows to cover in the future, a shout out in the credits at the end of every video podcast, and my undying love. You can find our Patreon channel by clicking the link in the description, and thank you for your consideration. Now let's get back into the episode. So right away, the opening of episode 1 is intense. I came into the show with some preconceived suspicions towards Sunny the Robot and robots in general. Media has been trying to tell us that robots are a bad idea for years with films like I, Robot and Terminator. And something about the cuteness of Sunny just really put me off before I really knew much more about the show. And boy howdy, was I right to be suspicious, because in our opening scene, we start out with a black screen and we hear a man repeatedly saying, "I love you," and then violently gets beat to death by what is later revealed to be a robot. Mass hysteria and chaos ensue in the all yellow room as people run about behind the camera off screen. You can even hear dogs barking, actually. And eventually, as the man is getting beat to death, someone comes in and shuts the robot off and puts them to sleep before turning to everyone to assure them that everything will be fine and no one will know. The image of the dead man on the floor who has been brutally beaten is what the viewer is left with as we roll into the intro credit sequence. So safe to say they are not holding any punches. Like, we have established right from the get-go what the tone of this show is going to be. I forgot to mention this is rated TVMA, so keep that in mind. And when our credits have concluded, we open up on a shot of Susie staring blankly into the distance, looking quite disheveled, snacking on some Santa Claus Christmas cookies. We start to see some flashbacks of what we presume to be her husband and son at the airport the day that she drops them off, as well as some cutbacks to her lying in her son's bed in a beautiful but empty home. We hear Susie sobbing quite violently until ultimately her mother-in-law snaps her out of her trance and regains her focus. The two of them are sitting at a table in a crowded room being interviewed by someone who is working with the rescue efforts and investigation around a mysterious plane crash. The interviewer is asking Susie questions like, what was your son wearing? What was your husband wearing? And Susie's having a difficult time remembering the answers to these questions. Something to call out also is that she's using an in-ear device that is a translator, as she isn't fluent in Japanese. Now, right away, I want to talk about Susie because in this scene, she is very obviously irritated and agitated by this process and does not want to be here. She mocks the interviewer saying, don't you have DNA? What are all these questions for? Can't you make out the difference between the charred bodies? Much to the dismay of all the other families that are around her going through the same process. And you can tell that Susie is just frustrated and uncomfortable in this environment. Eventually, the interviewer asks if her husband and son were traveling with a homebot on the plane. And this is where we learn that Susie hates robots. Funnily enough, because her mother died, was killed by a robot. Although we eventually learn from the mother-in-law that it was agreed upon that this was user error. We then find out that Susie's husband, Masa, works at Imatech. And as she claims, he's in refrigerators. Further questioning ultimately gets Susie even more annoyed, and she actually claps back at the interviewer at one point, which is pretty funny, asking her, do you know what your husband does all day? And she says, oh, he makes furniture, he's in prison. And she says, I think I remember what he's wearing. Just as a joke about, hey, your husband got locked up, I guess. I don't know. It was pretty mean. And I think she sensed that because she very quickly said, I'm going to go get some more cookies, stands up abruptly and walks away from the table. On her way over to the food table, she does find time, however, to get confronted by a cleaning robot, which she then promptly tells to suck a dick. Yeah, she really doesn't like robots. She tosses the plate of cookies that she has in the trash just to go start refilling the plate with new cookies. And when she's doing so, she observes a strange interaction between an older and younger man off in the distance. Keep the strange man in mind. However, we are interrupted by the mother-in-law, who's now caught up to Susie and has informed her that it's time for the tear-seeking ceremony. This ceremony is being offered by the hotel that all of this is happening at, and it is a way for people to come together to try to express their grief and move on. The idea being that crying alone is sad and that there's some comfort in expressing this grief together as a group. The man leading the ceremony's goal is to get people to cry because, as he says, a single tear can relieve years of stress. And his bright idea to do this is to have people call their loved ones' phones, which someone promptly points out is just going to go to voicemail because the phones were most likely destroyed in the plane crash. And yet this is exactly what the session leader wanted, because his hopes were that when people heard the voices of their loved ones, they would become emotional and cry and start to let go and accept their grief. So the leader of the session moves on one by one, stopping at people, getting them to call their loved ones, listening to the voicemails out loud, where they inevitably end up sobbing. The whole time, Susie is completely uncomfortable, muttering under her breath to her mother-in-law that she doesn't want to be here. But eventually, the leader gets to her. She starts off by saying that she's already cried and does not wish to participate, even getting so frustrated to throw her translator ear device onto the table. But after thinking of the memory of her husband and son and some gentle coaxing from the leader, she eventually agrees to participate. It wasn't until this point in the show that I really resonated with Susie as a character and came to understand why they were being so mean to everyone around them. There have been times in my life where I have genuinely had difficult things happen and I had become emotional. And one of the coping mechanisms that I always default to is to detach myself from those emotions and to throw up a wall, right? I think it's very common for people to get this hard exterior and to try to push other people away so that they don't have to deal with their grief and go through those emotions. And that's exactly what Susie's doing here. I mean, when she was being mean to the interviewer, her mother-in-law, her standoffish attitude, her unwillingness to participate in the group tear-seeking ceremony, it's all because she's trying to avoid the pain of this sudden loss and the mystery around her husband and son's disappearance. Admittedly, I was having a hard time liking our main character until this moment in the show. And this is where the show drops its first major bombshell. And this is what I knew right away that I was going to be in for a fun ride. Susie gets out her phone and starts to call Masa, and unlike the several people that went before her going straight to voicemail, her phone just keeps on ringing. ringing endlessly as people start to look confused and look at Susie. And oh my goodness, the implications of this are crazy. Susie and their mother-in-law storm out of the tear-seeking ceremony and walk off while the mother-in-law questions how could this be possible and starts to get a small glimmer of hope that maybe her son is still alive. Hope that is immediately shattered and dismissed by Susie, who has a very negative outlook and says that it's nothing. As the two of them are leaving the room, the mysterious older man from before that I told you guys about hands Susie a package. He actually tosses it to her of what looks like some form of snack. The mother-in-law is quick to step in and caution Susie against taking this from the man and reveals that he's actually a member of a Japanese gang called the Yakuza. She then goes on to say that the Yakuza are the worst and that during times of tragedy, they come out like cockroaches to help people and offer aid, but only ever expecting something in return. This is the last we see of that man for this episode, and we then move on to Susie being in line at a convenience store where she's listening to the news about the plane crash and the rescue efforts, as well as the death of a counselor named Ito. As she's standing in line, a man behind her makes a remark about the tragedy. She turns around to see who it is as he smiles and shrugs her off, basically. This is not the last time we're going to see this guy, by the way. At the moment watching the episode, I didn't think anything of this scene at all, but trust me, it's going to be important. It is now nighttime and Susie is walking back to her home when she turns a corner to see a man standing by a van right in front of her residence. The man's name is Yuki Tanaka, and he claims to be someone that works at Imatech and has worked with her husband. After telling her to not be afraid, he lets her know that he brought a gift for her and they head inside with a huge box. Susie moves forward and opens the box, and we get to see our character Sunny the robot for the very first time, which is the gift that Yuki brought. Susie is immediately taken aback and confused as Sunny chirps to life and is full of energy and so excited to meet her. Susie just kind of stands awkwardly back as Sunny comes in and tries to give her a hug and says, "Oh, not a hugger? That's okay, we'll get there." Susie is definitely apprehensive and, as we learned earlier, does not like robots, but was really confused when Yuki made a remark about Sunny being similar to Masa, eventually revealing to Susie that Masa did not work in refrigerators as she thought, as that department had moved to Myanmar 12 years ago. And this is the second bombshell of the episode for Susie, whose world and the way that she thought she perceived it is being challenged. Now back to Sunny, who is this cute house robot that was programmed specifically for Susie by Imatech. They had learned about Susie through Masa describing her, even down to the detail of them hating bananas, which there was kind of a funny moment in the episode where Sunny was like, "Yep, no bananas are going to be in this house." Yuki then goes on to say, "We even know that you've had a hard time making friends," to which Susie kind of retorts, "Did you know it's because I have dyslexia and that foreign language is hard for me to understand?" And that gives us a little bit more added context to why she was using the translator, as well as to why she might be isolated from those around her before even the events of the plane crash. It's safe to say that Susie is outraged at this point and does not want a robot. However, Yuki does eventually convince them to keep Susie, as it would bring great comfort to her missing and or deceased husband, Masa. She asks how to turn Sunny off, to which Yuki responds, "Just tell them to go to sleep." And we learn that Sunny's only allowed to listen to Susie's voice commands. It doesn't respond when Yuki tries to do it. And when Yuki leaves, there's this really funny moment. The first time that I actually laughed in the show out loud was because Sunny was like, "What are we going to do now?" kind of vibes. And Susie immediately said, "Sunny, sleep," and just shut her down. After putting Sunny to sleep, Susie secludes herself in a closet and starts making quick work of a bottle of wine, where she observes an office party card that had been left in there and closes the doors to cry in solitude. After a while, she tries calling Masa again, to which the phone just rings instead of going to voicemail. In a moment of sadness and desperation, she says under her breath, "Masa, where the fuck are you?" And to me, this indicates that now she has gone from just assuming the worst, that her husband and son are dead, to thinking that maybe something else entirely is going on. When Susie eventually drags herself out of the closet, she is alarmed to see Sunny standing in the living room making a drink and trying to cheer up Susie. After some further probing, we find out that Sunny supposedly does not know Masa, and her first memory is meeting Susie in the home just mere moments ago. Again, Sunny is put to sleep, and later on, we see Susie in the bathroom, who unfortunately runs out of toilet paper, and in their drunken stupor to go get some, trips and falls, breaking the glass and spilling wine all over the floor. And the noise from this event wakes Sunny up, and Sunny comes to aid Susie. Also, side note, as I'm recording this, Sunny, Susie, like the names, it's tripping me up a little bit, but don't get it twisted. Sunny is the robot, okay? That's all you need to know. Drunk, defeated, and possibly a bit embarrassed, Susie does not want any help from Sunny, especially when Sunny tries to move some of the toys, which is actually what Susie fell and tripped on. And we have this emotional moment where you can tell that Susie has not let go of the loss of her husband and son, or at least their disappearance, because she commands Sunny not to touch any of the toys that are scattered about the floor. One other side note I wanted to call to attention, it is very sad when Sunny gets put to sleep. She has this moment as she realizes the command is coming from Susie, where she kind of like sighs and her eyes get sad, and then she powers down and goes into sleep mode. And I don't like it. I don't know. I just don't like it. It makes me sad and uncomfortable simultaneously. After a moment of reflection, Susie remembers the office party card that she saw in the closet and decides to go, which is actually being hosted at Ematech's facilities. As she walks in, we see a huge bustling holiday party as people are getting drunk and going crazy, and the facility itself is like what you would imagine a Google facility. I don't know. It's magnificent. It's huge. It's amazing. She stops a passerby and asks to see Yuki Tanaka. The whole point of her coming to the party is because she wants to get rid of this dang robot. She wants to find the man that dropped it off at her house. Eventually, they do find Yuki Tanaka, but it is not the same Yuki that was there with the robot. It is someone of the same name, a much younger employee of Ematech, who then goes on to have this funny interaction with Susie where he talks badly about Masa, assuming that this is someone that worked below Masa at the company, and kind of was like, yeah, man, he's a real dick. Like, you don't want to be the asshole that disappoints this guy. And then realizes from his drunken stupor, oh crap, I'm talking to his wife. This exchange, while being somewhat comedic, also helps to share more insight about Masa, who we haven't officially met in the story, and see that while he may have been a fun-loving dad and husband in the home life, he was lying about his role at his job, and his peers didn't exactly look up to him, or at least like him. Susie actually brings up the line from the tear seeking ceremony from before, because our other character Yuki has become emotional thinking of his own dead father, and says, oh, a single tear can relieve a year of stress, and hands him a tissue before telling him to go fuck himself and walk off. Susie continues searching through the party for anything that might be able to help her find Yuki when she sees a homebot come through a side door and decides to sneak through the door while no one is watching. Leading down a set of stairs, Susie eventually comes up to some double doors and uses her phone to translate some writing that says Sakamoto Incubator. When she passes through the double doors, she's presented with a long hallway with 4 different rooms. On the left, we have what looks like a dentist's office where you would get dental work done. On the right, we have a bar lounge. On the right, at the very end of the hallway, down past the bar lounge, we have what looks to be some form of shrine. And then the main room of interest is all the way on the left, down at the end of the hall. It is a all yellow room with 2 dogs playing inside of it. Susie goes into the yellow room and greets the dogs, and she wants to look around. And this is where we see blood splattered on the walls, grounds, and 2 tracks of blood that look like a robot passed through a pool of blood. And as the viewer, this is when we have the revelation that this is the room from our opening sequence where we saw the man get brutally beaten to death. This explains the dogs barking and all the pandemonium, but it doesn't explain any of the messed up stuff going on down here, especially in this room. And Susie's confused and alarmed and runs right out of there. I'd like to pause from our synopsis here to call out the fact that if there was some shady stuff going on in these hallways, why are these doors not locked? It's not like she had a security badge, right? She just used her phone to scan the words and waltzed right in. It's almost as if someone wanted her to find it, especially considering our mysterious character at the beginning, who I'm assuming to be Masa, was assuring everyone that no one will know. It's like you didn't even get the blood out of the carpet. The dogs are still there. I mean, I know they're not witnesses. They can't testify, but come on. Anyway, rushing out of the party, dazed and confused, Susie goes to a bar that happens to be her favorite and is also the bar where she met Masa all those years ago before they were married. Susie orders a drink, which ends up being made incorrectly by a new bartender named Mixie. Susie was just about to leave, but Mixie convinces them to let them make it up to them and make them a new drink, and the 2 of them begin talking. When asked where Susie's husband is, it's really interesting here. She actually lies and said they just broke up. And part of me thinks that this is her subconscious way of not committing to the idea that he's dead. He's not there right now, but she can't explain why. and there's too much grief involved. So she just comes up with this other lie that makes it more bearable, I guess. The two go back and forth about their lives and continue bonding. And eventually we see that the bar has closed and they are still there drinking and talking. We learn that Susie came to Kyoto, Japan years ago to get away from it all and be alone, although we don't know what she's running from. They share a personal connection over a song that's playing and share some secrets about themselves, like Mixie is balding and Susie has a freckle on her eyelid. But eventually it gets late and Susie says she should let Maxie get home, and it's revealed to us that Maxie's actually got no one to go home to. She just broke up with her girlfriend. And she makes a remark about her home bot being the only thing that she would have waiting for her, and also remarks that they are no good in bed, which kind of shocks Susie to learn that she is having sex with her home bot. When prying for more information, Mixie tells Susie that she has a dealer, which is not like a drug dealer, but for code. Apparently robots can be hacked into and made to do all sorts of different things. The conversation turns sinister, and the implications of that statement are huge, especially when the death of Counselor Ito is brought up. Mixie says that the robot fell down the stairs and crushed him, and that she wasn't so sure that it was an accident. Susie goes on to say that if robots were killing people, surely they would know about it, and both of the two look at each other with an air of doubt in their minds. This is enough to cause Susie to rush off and go home. Now, right away, I've got some red flags about Mixie. It could just be perfectly, innocent. Maybe this is just a new bartender and the two of them are bonding and she's going to turn out to be impactful later on into the story. However, I think it's oddly suspicious that our main character, Susie, for reasons I'll get into here shortly, always goes to this bar. This is her favorite spot. This is where she used to go with her husband specifically too, quite frequently. And then this night, there's a new bartender who messed up the drink. And then they get into this conversation where she's asking all of these personal questions of Susie. Kind of a conspiracy theory, but in the back of my head, I'm almost wondering if this organization's out there watching Susie or trying to get to Masa and planted someone there posing as a bartender, which would make sense if they got the drink wrong. I don't know, but I just letting you guys know now that my eye's on Mixie. Also, Mixie as a bartender name is like pretty cool. Like I just thought that was like a cool note. So to back up my crazy conspiracy theory, as Susie is walking home, we see her being watched by a man using surveillance cameras. The man is the same man that was behind them in the convenience store earlier in the episode, behind them in line when they made the remark about the tragedy. As they watch them walking, they send off a message saying we are on her and she's alone to an unknown source. This just kind of further suggests the narrative that there is an organization that's watching Susie and trying to get to her and or possibly her husband. Susie steps inside her home and is shocked when she sees something that looks like blood on the ground with also robot tracks going through it, like what she saw in the yellow room. I believe that this is just the red wine that was spilled from earlier, and Sunny was actually trying to clean and panicked when Susie came home and pretended to sleep. Susie, after a long and tiring day, decided enough was enough and grabbed a giant duffel bag to stuff Sunny into, using a dolly to carry Sunny out to a bridge in the middle of the night. Their plan was to dump Sunny over the bridge and into the river to be done with them forever. Unfortunately, that plan doesn't work out because Sunny is just way too heavy to lift over the railing. And eventually Susie's like, you know what? Whatever, and just walks home, leaving Sunny out there alone in the night. We cut forward to Susie in bed as they begin to do some research on Masa, their husband, on their phone. Next, they look up articles about Counselor Ito's death involving the robot. When they zoom in on the photo, they see more red tracks of blood in that picture, like a robot has passed through a pool of blood, and become entirely overwhelmed. And when they close out their search, they're then bombarded with family photos and videos, which obviously makes them highly emotional and distraught, leading them to try to call Masa again, to which the phone rings endlessly. Susie is woken up the next day with a rude awakening as Sunny has made it back to the premises with cookies and says Merry Christmas. Susie is rightfully frightened and goes for a bat and is about ready to bash Sunny's head in with this thing. She's like, nope, I'm not dealing with it. But just before she strikes Sunny with the bat, Sunny says, are you sure you want to do that? In what is kind of a creepy tone to me, but does this hand gesture that reminds Susie of the exact gesture her husband made on the day that they left at the airport. Shocked, Susie asks Sunny to make the motion again and again and again, which leaves off the episode with the chilling line, can't you see, Susie, I was programmed for you. And we see Susie's face and everything cuts to black. And that is the end of the episode. The end credits for the episode are featuring a song called Blue, Blue Day, which lyrics read as such. It's been a blue, blue day. I feel like running away. I feel like running away from it all. My love has been untrue. She's found somebody new. It's been a blue, blue day for me. And I think if you give this song a listen, there is some interesting little notes in there that maybe speak on the series as a whole. At this point, we have introduced the concept that Masa, Susie's husband, hasn't been telling us the full truth and also may not be dead. Not only is this a highly confusing environment and stressful environment for Susie to be in, but this has also more than likely broken her trust with her husband if she does find out that he's alive. And personally, I thought that this was a perfect song to end off episode 1 with. I love so much about this opening episode for this series. It introduces so many themes. It does a really great job of introducing our main character and immediately throwing the viewer into a state of confusion where I am certainly being left wanting to know where the story is going to go and what's going to happen next. I do want to find out more about this organization that is stalking Susie and find out what their motive is. Obviously, I'm left wondering what the fate of her husband and son are. If they are still alive, where are they being kept? Why haven't they made contact with Susie? And ultimately would give this show so far like a 8.5 out of 10. It was really good. I liked it a lot. As always, I am ever curious to see what you guys had to think about episode number 1, what your theories might be, or how you reacted to some of the shocking material. If you guys enjoyed this episode and you can't wait for the next one, you're in luck because they actually debuted with a 2-episode premiere, as Apple TV Plus often does, meaning that part 2 of our series covering the show will be uploaded very soon. To stay informed on what to watch and get updated whenever we post a podcast or any of our content, you can follow us on all social medias at ShowSleuthPod is our handle on everything. Again, we have a video podcast on the YouTube channel and audio versions on the podcast everywhere that you like to listen to podcasts on. Be on the lookout to see when we announce which other shows we're going to be covering for the month of July. But as for now, you all did some damn fine detective work today, and I'll see you in the next episode.